Okay, good morning, everyone. We will go ahead and get started here. I do want to point out that these presentations are posted online on our Avocet site. If you go to the web address listed on the screen, on the left-hand side panel there under the What's New drop-down, if you select that, you'll be able to find the TELPAS Assessment Management System Overview presentation and also the TELPAS Online Training Center Overview presentation. And that is the one we will start with today, the TELPAS Online Training Center Overview. So again, the presentation is posted online on our Avocet website for both the TELPAS Online Training Center and for the TELPAS and the Assessment Management System. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. This portion of the training will cover the layout of the training site, and we'll also talk about the resources and contact information that are available for you. First, we'll start off with an overview of the Online Training Center. And we'll start off here with some important dates. So starting on top here, you should have already received your TELPAS manuals. Those were shipped to the district back in January. And they also are posted on the Avocet site. And for the Online Training Center, we had the assembling and verifying of the grades 2 through 12 writing collections available January 10th, and January 26th is when the online basic training courses for new K1 and 2 through 12 graders became available. And the calibrations, those opened this week on February 12th. The calibration window opened for new and returning graders, and February 12th is also the earliest eligibility date for TELPAS writing samples. And here we have our TELPAS assessment window that runs from February 26th through April the 6th. April the 6th is also the date that the training courses and the calibrations close. So you want to make sure that your raters have completed their trainings and the calibrations before that April 6th deadline. Also, on July 2nd is when the TELPAS Online Training Center is actually going to shut down for maintenance. So you want to make sure that your raters have downloaded their calibration certificates before that July 2nd date. Again, come July 2nd, the TELPAS Online Training Center is going to shut down for maintenance. So you want to make sure your raters have downloaded their certificates. So those are some important dates here in regards to TELPAS Online Training. So let's talk about some other updates here for this year. In order for raters to receive a certificate of completion, they will have to complete the modules, and now we have practice activities outside of the modules that they will be able to complete. And again, they have to complete both of those, the module and the practice activity, before they receive that certificate of completion. And now, this year, they'll be able to print their own certificates. They'll be able to go to the scoring summary tab, which we'll take a look at here in a bit, and select to print their own certificates, and they can even email it to themselves now, which means testing coordinators no longer have to print certificates. Again, the testing coordinators, again, no longer have to print these certificates. Also, since the listening and speaking is now online, the grades 2 through 12 online basic training course and calibration activities now only include the domain of writing. And we'll talk about those special circumstances for listening and speaking. For those students who are not able to take that online. Again, we mentioned about the training courses now having a practice activity outside of the modules. And here's that rare circumstance where a student will not be able to access the online listening and speaking test. So we will have a separate holistically rated listening and speaking rater training available. And that is going to require TEA approval, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. And here are some reminders for the Online Training Center. Remember, we mentioned that the Online Training Center will shut down for maintenance, which means that every year raters have to create and establish a new account because the site, the Online Training Center, does not save the training histories or the certificates on the website there. Those accounts and certificates are purged, which is why raters have to create a new account every year. So again, the training histories or certificates are not saved in the TELPAS Online Training Center. Pearson and TEA, we don't have access to those previous year's certificates. So remember, your campus coordinators, use district testing coordinators, want to make sure that you maintain that record of completed rater training. And again, for this year, you want to make sure that your raters print out their certificates before the training center shuts down for maintenance. And back in January, district coordinators were sent an email that had the keyword for users to create their account for this year. So if you need to find that, it is posted in the assessment management system. It's actually in Pearson Access Next. If you have your administration selected to TELPAS, if you go to reports, publish reports, that's where you will find that broadcast email. It's a PDF in there, and you do have to have the role of district testing coordinator in Pearson Access Next in order to be able to view that information. Another reminder for the online training center is to make sure that whatever computer or devices that your raters are using to access the calibrations and the courses, that they meet the minimum requirements for the online training center. And if your raters have any problems with pages not loading correctly or stuck loading, you want to make sure that they've enabled their pop-ups. So just a few reminders there for the online training center. So now let's talk about the TELPAS training, and for those students in grades K1 and grades 2 through 12, which is how we have it broken down here. Starting with grades K1. So those students are going to be rated holistically for listening and speaking, reading and writing, and those assessments are based on classroom observations and student interactions. So if there's a new teacher serving as a new TELPAS rater for writing, listening, speaking, and reading, they have to complete the online basic training component. And we do have a note here indicating that for new raters and returning raters, that they haven't completed the calibration activities within the last 3 school years, then they are required to complete the online basic training course before they calibrate. And if they are returning raters, then they would just have to complete their monitored online calibration activity, and that has to be done every year. Students in grades 2 through 12, they will take an online multiple choice reading test, and remember for this year it is a shorter blueprint for the online reading. And this year new is that the students will take the online listening and speaking test, and their writing collections will still be rated holistically. So those are the tests for students in grades 2 through 12. And same thing applies if it's a teacher serving as a new TELPAS rater for writing, then they would have to complete the online basic training component and then the calibration. And for those returning raters, they will just have to complete the monitored online calibration activity, and of course that is also done every year. So again, as a reminder, for rater who has not completed their calibrations within the last 3 years, they are required to complete the online basic training course before they calibrate. Next here is a training flow chart here for you to have a visual of how this works. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we have the new raters, and you'll see here they have to complete the online basic training course, and then they'll complete their online calibration activities. Again, that has to be done in a monitored setting, and they have 2 sets in which to meet sufficient calibration, set 1 and set 2, and each of these sets is going to have a separate passcode, and we'll talk more about that here in a bit. So that is for new raters, and again, if you are a returning rater, for those raters who are returning, they would just have to complete their online calibration activity, and they also have 2 sets in which to meet sufficient calibration. So now let's take a closer look at the TELPAS Online Training Center. So this is the site here. The web address is listed on the screen. And on the last paragraph here, there's a link for users to select to view the minimum system requirements for accessing these courses and calibrations. So that can be selected there. If a user has already created their account, they would just log in by entering their email and their password and selecting the login button. And there's also a forgot password button for those users who have forgotten their password. So when a user is ready to sign up or establish their account in the online training center, they'll click the sign up button here. And the first thing they're going to be prompted for is to enter their keyword to create their own profile. And again, district testing coordinators receive that keyword for users to create their account. That was sent in a broadcast email, and you will also be able to find this again in the assessment management system in Pearson Access Next under reports, published reports. But again, you do have to have the district testing coordinator account. Next here on the right-hand side of the screen here, we'll see after a user enters their keyword and selects Go, they will have their form to fill out. And all of the fields are required that have the red asterisks there. They'll enter in their email ID, they'll confirm their email, enter their first name, last name. They'll also create and confirm their password, enter their region and district, and below that they have a checkbox that has to be checked there, indicating their rater agreement, that they've read and understand the rater agreement for TELPAS online training course and calibration. After they select that checkbox and have all the required fields entered, they want to make sure to select submit, and that will then establish their account. Okay, there's the information there, the checkbox, and again, make sure submit is selected. And this is what the homepage will look like when the raters have created their account. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see where they're able to select the settings drop-down if they wanted to change their password or update their profile. And this is also where users will go to sign out of the online training center. So let's take a closer look at this page here, starting with the left-hand side of the screen, which is the Start Here section, which includes introductory text here. And it does mention here information on special administration for TELPAS listening and speaking, and also information on the assembling and verifying of the writing collection. On the right-hand side to that is the announcements section. These are some of the dates that we mentioned earlier, and you'll also notice in red it is showing to point out here April 6th, again, is when our training courses and calibrations close. That means users will not be able to access the courses or calibrations after 5 p.m. Central Time on April 6th. Also on July 2nd is when the TELPAS Online Training Center shuts down for maintenance. Okay, the next section would be for the user to select their training. So they want to make sure that they know what their assigned cluster is, so that way they can choose the appropriate training here. And they may refer to you or your campus testing coordinators if they are not sure of their training requirements. And if you do have any questions or they have any questions, you can reference the district and campus coordinators manual. So that's where they'll select their training. And here is where users will be able to select the holistically rated listening and speaking training. And again, this is training for raters who have TEA approval to holistically rate a student in listening and speaking. And there is going to be a password or passcode that is required for users to be able to enter it in here. So again, not everyone is going to be able to just go in here and click and access this training. They will need a passcode and they will need TEA approval. And right below that are the resources and support sections. Resources, you'll be able to select the link for the glossary of terms for TELPAS Holistic Rating Training. There's also a link to the TELPAS PLDs and also the TELPAS rating tips. And right below that is our support information. Okay, next we have our training courses. So up on top, you're going to see the different tabs that are now available. The training course tab, the practice tab, the calibration, and the scoring summary. So here we have our training course tab selected, and users will be able to click on the link here to view additional instructions on how to navigate in the site. And here's the link to select to enter the writing course module. And it does mention in this the paragraph below that once they've completed this module, proceed to the practice tab. After completing the practice activities, a certificate of completion will be available. So again, that is the writing section here. And up on top we have the educator home page or educator home link. So whenever that is selected, it will take the user back to the Online Training Center home screen. And here is an example of accessing the listening and speaking modules. And this does mention here on that first paragraph that the use of headphones or quality external speakers is necessary to complete this course for the listening and speaking. And the next tab over is the practice tab. So remember, after users or raters have completed their training course, they'll be able to go on to their practice activity, and then they'll receive that certificate of completion. So here's the example here. The rater will enter in their rating, and it will show their assigned rating after it's been entered. And the text below the writing sample will give an explanation of why this rating was rated that way. You also see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's quick access to the PLDs. and users can even select to review to see the different, to see the items that they've entered. So the next tab over is the calibration tab. So before we take a look at that, just a couple of bits of information on the calibration. So remember, everyone has to complete the calibration, whether they're new or returning raters, and it has to be done in a monitored session that's been established by the campus or district. Now you can reference again the district and campus coordinator's manual for additional information on conducting these monitored sessions and who is actually able to proctor those calibration sessions. And those raters will be given a passcode by that session proctor in order to access that calibration. So remember, we mentioned that that report is available to you as a district testing coordinator. Again, you have to have that role of district testing coordinator in Pearson Access Next in order to access that resource, and you'll be able to find that by going to Reports, Publish Reports. Again, you want to make sure that you have the TELPAS administration selected before you do that. And most raters will need about 1 to 2 hours to complete their calibrations, and they have to finish it once they've started it. So raters will not be able to save their progress, then come back at a later time and complete it. It has to be done once it's started. And for K1, they will have 10 students to be rated, and they have to rate at least 70% correctly in order to demonstrate sufficient calibration. And the same thing applies for those 2 through 12 clusters. They'll have 10 writing collections, and raters have to rate at least 70% of the collections correctly in order to demonstrate sufficient calibration. And here is a screen capture of the resource that I was mentioning in the assessment management system in Pearson Access Next. Again, you want to make sure that you have the TELPAS administration selected. And if you go navigate to Reports, Publish Reports, you'll be able to see that resource listed under file name, and that's going to have the email from December that has the keyword for users to establish their online training center account. It's also going to have it's going to list the professional development hours that are earned for these courses and calibrations. It also has the calibration passcodes that are going to be needed for these monitored calibration sessions. So again, this is the document that contains the calibration passcodes, and it even has a calibration session roster that you'll be able to print out and fill out for those raters that are attending that monitored calibration session. So again, this is under Reports, Publish Reports. Make sure you have the TELPAS administration selected. If you do not see it here, and you do have the TELPAS administration selected, make sure you're the district testing coordinator in Pearson Access Next. Otherwise, you won't be able to see this. Again, you have to have the role of district testing coordinator in order to be able to view this information. And this is the document that contains those calibration passcodes, and those are going to be updated weekly. So right now, we have the calibration passcodes, and again, there's going to be 2 passcodes, 1 for each set, 2 passcodes for each day. So right now we have the first week's passcodes out there, and then we will post the additional week's passcodes as well. Okay, and we should have those posted on Friday for the next week's. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue now in the Training Center. And again, remember, this is posted in the Pearson Access Next site. So now we're going to go back to the Online Training Center and take a look at what the calibration looks like for your raters here. So on here, again, we have the calibration selected here. And this is where your raters will be able to read through the collections here and assign a rating. They'll select their beginning, intermediate, advanced, or advanced high rating here. And again, they can also select the PLDs to view the PLDs, and they can select the review button to review any ratings that they've already assigned. And here is an example of a completed calibration set. So it will show what the rater entered as their rating and what the assigned rating is. And again, below the writing sample here, it will give an explanation as to why it was given that assigned rating. Okay, so that is the calibration there. The next tab over is the scoring summary tab. And this is where your raters will be able now to print their own certificate. So there's a certificate column here. You can see they can select to print, and they can even email their certificate to themselves. So the other columns here is going to list the activity, the status, whether it's completed, the number correct and total, the percentage, whether they met the passing requirement here. Of course, we have the certificate column. And then we have the professional development column, which will list the professional development hours earned for these courses and calibrations. And here is an example of a K1 online basic training course certificate. So again, the certificate will contain the user's information, and it will also list a number of professional development hours earned. In this instance, they've earned 5 professional development hours for completing the online basic training course for kindergarten and grade 1. Here's an example of the 2 through 12 basic training course certificate, and an example of the calibration certificate. So now just a couple of notes here about our resources and contact information. Again, we've referenced this during today's training, that 2018 District and Campus Coordinators Manual. Again, you want to reference that. If you have any questions on calibration sessions, TELPAS rater requirements, all that kind of stuff, you'll be able to find in the 2018 District Campus Coordinators Manual. We also have the Educator Guide to TELPAS. We have our Texas-specific STAR Alternate 2 and TELPAS Assessment Management System User's Guide, TELPAS Rater Manual, the TELPAS Test Administrator Manual, and all of these manuals are available on the Avocet site, same location where you downloaded these presentations for today. You'll be able to find all of these resources listed here, all the different manuals. And on the TEA site, you can also access additional resources, including the request for a special administration of an online assessment process. So these are the resources available for TELPAS online training. And again, all of these resources, the manuals, are posted on Avocet, including the District and Campus Coordinators Manual, TELPAS Rater, and Test Administrator manuals as well. And here's our contact information. If you have any questions from the Online Training Center, you can contact us. And if you have any questions as far as policy is concerned, you'll want to contact TA Student Assessment Division at the number listed on the screen. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our TELPAS Online Training Center portion. So we're going to go ahead now and continue with the TELPAS in the assessment management system here. And again, this will cover those tasks that have to be completed in the Pearson Access Next site for TELPAS. So some key dates for the site here. The November 13th through December 15th window, that was for your data collection option. That was when you had the option to select whether you wanted Pearson to upload your TELPAS student data from PEIMS, or if you were going to upload the data yourself. So again, that window, that deadline was December 15th. We also mentioned earlier that your districts received their TELPAS Rater and Test Administrator manuals back in January. January 10th through April 6th is when you are able to submit your student registration information. So remember, even if you had selected for Pearson to upload your data, you're still responsible for uploading or updating the years in U.S. schools and the SIFE, the Asylee School Refugee statuses. Next, we have the test session setup. That began January 10th. You're able to currently create test sessions. Proctor caching will be available February 19th. So this is going to be available for your technology coordinators to proctor cache, pre-cache, or download the test content from Pearson server to their local proctor caching computer. So again, we'll make that available come February 19th. And the TELPAS assessment window opens February 26th, and that runs through April the 6th. Now, there is an extension of the TELPAS window that has been extended by 1 week. One thing, though, that you do want to be aware of is that there is no verification window for TELPAS this year. So come April 6th, the TELPAS assessment window That is the deadline. And April 6th is also the deadline for ordering additional reports. So some key dates there for you for TELPAS. We mentioned about selecting your data collection option. Of course, that deadline has already passed, but if you wanted to verify that information in the Pearson Access Next site, if you navigate to Set Up Organizations and select Manage Participation and Start, this is where you would have selected whether you wanted Pearson to load your student data or if you were going to load the data yourself. So again, that deadline has already passed. So here, you want to make sure that if you, again, had selected for Pearson to load your data, remember we don't upload the years in U.S. schools, your SILE school refugee statuses. So you want to make sure that's done, and you can do that through a file upload, or you can do that manually within the Pearson Access Next site. So let's talk about that TELPAS test administration process, and that of course starts with making sure that your students are registered and assigned to their correct test. Remember, students in grades K1 will be assigned to the holistic ratings test. Students in grades 2 through 12 will be assigned to the holistic writing test. They'll also be assigned to the online listening and speaking test. Remember, listening and speaking, it's going to be one test. And they'll also be assigned to a reading test. So remember, students in grades 2 through 12, they'll be assigned to 3 different tests. And again, you also want to make sure that you update those years in U.S. schools. And again, you can do that through a file upload, or you can do that manually within the system, and we do have step-by-step instructions on how to perform each of those actions in the STAR Alternate 2 and TELPAS Assessment Management System User's Guide that you can access through our support documentation in Pearson Access Next, or you can also find that guide in the Avocet site. Okay, so that is one of the first steps that you'll take. Next, you want to make sure to create your online test sessions, and we're going to take a look at these steps here in a bit. So you want to make sure that you're creating your online test sessions for K1 holistic ratings, and for 2 through 12, you're creating your online listening and speaking session, reading session, and your holistic writing session. Next, you'll administer the listening and speaking and reading tests, and make sure that the holistic ratings have been entered for all your students. And administrators will be able to launch tests and enter in the holistic ratings, and we're going to take a look at how that is going to be done. And here we have the step to enter in your score code and accommodation information. So this can actually be done anytime here. This is where you'll just go in and make sure that any score codes, if they were determined by the ART committee and documented in the student's IEP, that those are indicated. And you also want to make sure to enter in any accommodations, and you'll indicate that in the Pearson Access Next site as well, and we'll take a look at that. So again, that's your test administration process. Again, you want to make sure that your students are registered and assigned to the correct tests before you start creating their test sessions. And here's a visual of how test sessions are created and how they will be created here. When you create your test sessions, test sessions are virtual groupings of students that are typically going to take the same test at the same time. So you're creating your test sessions, you're assigning the test for that test session, and you're adding students to that test session. Next, you want to make sure that your tests are pre-cached. This is where we talked about on February 19th that proctor caching is going to be available. So you want to make sure then, if you're using proctor caching in your districts, in your schools, that is done after test sessions have been created and students added to your test sessions. Then the next step will be to prepare the session. So preparing the session, this is actually assigning the students to their test forms. It assigns a test form to the students when the test session is prepared. And preparing the session can be done at the same time as proctor caching, or it can be done before or after proctor caching is done. And again, not all districts are going to pre-cache, but we do highly recommend that you do pre-cache. And just a little background on pre-cache, or a little just to give you some of the advantages of pre-caching test content. It reduces the amount of bandwidth that is needed while students are testing in your schools, and it also speeds up the delivery of the test content. So those are just a couple of advantages of pre-caching your test content. So again, you want to pre-cache, prepare your test session. After your test sessions have been prepared, then you'll be able to start your test session. After you start your test sessions, you want to make sure that you unlock those students' tests, and we'll walk you through the steps on how to do that. So again, you'll create the session, pre-cache the sessions. And pre-caching, you can pre-cache by test or session. You'll prepare the test sessions, start them, and then unlock it. And we'll go through these steps next here, starting with creating the TELPAS online session. Of course, you want to make sure that you have the TELPAS test administration selected up on the top right-hand corner. And this is a TELPAS training, but just as an FYI, you do not have to create test sessions for STAR Alternate 2. Throwing that out as a reminder, test sessions do not have to be created for STAR Alternate 2. So when you are creating your TELPAS test sessions, you'll go to Testing, select Sessions. Then on the drop-down here, for your tasks, you're going to select to create edit sessions and start. And here's where you will enter in your session details. You'll enter in your session name, your organization. Then you're going to select here the test that's going to be assigned. You want to make sure, again, that you're selecting the correct test assignment. Over on the right-hand side here, you have the scheduled start date, time, and lab location. Again, anything that has a red asterisk is a required field, and that includes the scheduled start date. And that being said, the test session does not start until your administrator or an authorized user actually starts the session. This is for your planning purposes here. Right below the test assigned here, you're going to see the form group type. So if you had selected, for example, if you had the listening and speaking approval to be rated holistically, you're still going to assign the listening and speaking rating here, but under form group type, you want to make sure to select the holistic ratings form group type. So you'll select your form, otherwise it will be online. And right below that, you have your pre-caching computer information. That more applies, again, if you will be doing proctor caching in your schools and districts. And below that is where you will be able to enter in your students. So if you had once you have your selections here for your organization and for your test assignment, all of those students who are assigned to that test at this organization will appear here for you to be able to add to this test session. And you'll be able to add them by individual student, or you can add them by group if you have created groups for them. So here, again, you'll be able to, and you can create your test session without adding your students here. You can always go back later and add your students, but I would recommend you adding them as you're creating them. Adding the students as you're creating these test sessions. After you've entered in all the required fields, added your students there, you can select Create, and your test sessions would then be created. And you can view a list of your test sessions that have already been created. If you go to Testing and select Sessions, you can search by selecting the drop-down and showing all results. You can filter your search there, and you can even change the display of your sessions here. You can add the different columns here, manage your columns by session, session status, test, number of students, organization, and selecting apply here. And that will, again, be a way for you to manage your columns and how you view them on this page. So we talked about a little bit about pre-caching the test content after the sessions have been created and the students have been added to the sessions. Students have to be added to those sessions, then the test content can be cached. And again, that's typically going to be a step that your technology coordinators will perform, which we'll talk more about on our Friday webinar. If you do need additional information, though, on pre-caching the test content, you'll be able to find that in our user's guide for STAR Alternate 2 and TELPAS, and you can even find that on our Pearson Access Next online user guide. So once you've created a test session, you're going to see that there's a column for your test session status, and these are the different test statuses that may appear. First one is not prepared. That is going to be right after you've created a test session. That will be the status, not prepared. Preparing means the session is in queue for form assignment. It mentions here seal codes. We will not be using seal codes for TELPAS testing. But when you see the preparing status, that means that test's form is actually being assigned to that student, to the individual students. Ready indicates that all forms have been assigned to the session. In progress will indicate that a session is active and the students are actually in testing. Stop will indicate that all testing is complete and the students can't be added to those sessions any longer. And if you see the errors not prepared status, then that will indicate that you should contact Pearson support for assistance. Okay, so those are the different statuses for your test sessions. So now we'll talk about preparing your test sessions. And you'll do that by going to Testing and then Students in Sessions. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you're going to locate your test session. You can select here, Add a Session, and find that. and you can add them on to the session list here. And you'll see here that the status is showing not prepared. So you can select a session here from the list and select to prepare the session, and it will start going through its processing status. And you could even leave it in the combined view here, selection, and prepare multiple sessions at the same time. So once that process is complete, the session will appear in the ready status. So there's the prepare session button. And here's the combined view. So if we wanted to prepare all the sessions, so on this previous screen here, we're preparing one session at a time. And on this screen here, we have the combined view selected. So we're going to prepare all the sessions that are showing up on this list at the same time. And here, now you see that the status has changed from not prepared to ready. And again, once the session is in a ready status, then you'll be able to start the session. And again, if you have it in the combined view, you can start all the sessions that are listed there, or you can go through, select an individual test session, and start it one at a time. Okay, so you do have those different options there, but remember, you can start all sessions at the same time if you wanted to. So after a session is prepared and a user clicks on the Start Session button, you want to make sure that the student's tests are also unlocked. So the tests are not going to automatically unlock once the session has been started. So if a student is also added to a session that has already been started, then that new test is going to be added as locked, and you'll have to unlock it. And this is how you'll do that. In the test session, once you have that test session pulled up there, you're going to see the screen here. Up on top, you have a slider here to unlock the tests. And you can unlock all the students' tests in that session at the same time. Or you can go down to the individual student, and in the test status column there, you can click on the drop down and select to unlock that student's test, that individual student's test. So again, you can unlock all the tests in the session at the same time, or go through and unlock an individual student's tests. Okay. Next, you want to make sure to print your student's test ticket. So after your students have been added to your test sessions, you'll be able to print their student test tickets. And you can do that by clicking on the resources after you've located your test session. Click on the resources drop down. And if you wanted to, you can just select the student's test tickets that you want to print, or you can print all of them. So here, if we select resources, you'll see there we have the options of printing all for this session or just printing the ones that we selected for the session. And here is the different formats in which to print. You can print one per page, multiple students per page, and you even have a grid or a list view to print your student test tickets. And again, these will have the username and passwords that the students will need to log in and start taking their test. They'll log into TestNav with the student test tickets that you provided for them. And after your students have logged in and started testing, you'll be able to see their status. There's a student test status key up on top to indicate what is listed in the student test status column. So let's take a look at these different statuses here for your students. And that starts with the ready status. That means the student hasn't started the test just yet. Active indicates that the student has already logged in and started the test. Exited means that the student has exited the test, but they haven't submitted their test responses. So this is a very important one here. I would circle this or make note to this one. Whenever a student exits the test, they haven't finished the test yet. For whatever reason, they may be going on a break or they got kicked out, whatever the situation may be. If they're showing in an exited status, the test administrator has to resume them before they can continue testing. Okay, so you want to make sure that your test administrators are aware of that. If the student is showing in an exited status and they come back to return to finish the test administrator has to resume that test in Pearson Access Next before the student attempts to log in. Then we have the resume status. That means the student's been authorized to resume the test, but they haven't logged in. Completed will indicate that the test has been submitted by the student through TestNav and the data is going to be processed. And we can't change that status unless we do that undo student test submission, and you'll have to contact Pearson in that situation. We'll talk more about that. Then you have the mark complete status. That means the student has exited the test and will not resume the same test or it could be they've never logged into the test, but the test session has to be stopped. So remember, test sessions, students in a test session have to be in either a completed or marked complete status before you're able to stop the test session. So let's look here now at the student's test progress. So remember, in that student test status column where you're able to select to unlock or resume a student, you can actually click, instead of clicking on the actual drop down there, if you click where it says exited here, if you click on the actual status, it will pull up the student's test and item progress. So you can actually see the questions. You'll see the question numbers on the left-hand side, and this is just an example here, the questions on the left-hand side and whether the student visited and answered those questions. So again, when you are viewing students in their sessions, in the student test status column, if you wanted to view their test and item progress, just click on the actual status here. Okay, and to resume a student, you'll do the same thing here. You'll go to that student test status column, and this is if you wanted to resume an individual student or do one student at a time here. You can click on that student test status, the drop down next to exited, and then just select resume, and that student's test would then be resumed. If you wanted to resume multiple students' tests, you can do that as well. On the testing students in session screen here, you'll locate those students that are showing in an exited status. So here we see the student test status is exited. So we want to, instead of coming here and clicking each one to resume, which you can also do, you can select multiple students here. And on the task dropdown, you can select to resume student test, start, and you'll be taken to this screen here where you can select those students here and then resume them. And you can resume from this button or this button here. So again, after you have your student selected here, resume. That means you're going to resume both of these students here at the same time. After you select resume, you'll get a green success changes saved message. And you'll see now that the student status has changed from exited to resumed. That means they can log back in and continue testing. Okay, so that's how students are resumed. You may have a situation where you'll have to mark a student's test complete, and these are the steps on how to do that. After locating your session and finding the student's test that you want to mark complete, you'll click the checkbox next to that PEIMS ID. On the task dropdown, select Mark Student's Test Complete, and then Start, and you'll be taken to this next screen here where you will enter in the reason for marking the student's test complete, making sure to select the checkbox next to that student's name, and then Mark Complete. And after you select Mark Complete, you'll also get a green Success Changes Saved message. And again, after all the students are in a completed or a marked complete status, then you'll be able to stop the test session. So next here we're going to talk about entering the holistic rating. So what we discussed earlier was the actual different test sessions for reading, listening, and speaking. Now here is where you'll have the authorized user who is able to actually launch, test, and enter the TELPAS holistic ratings, and they're doing this through the Pearson Access Next site. So your users will not need the student's authorization tickets here. They won't need the student test tickets to enter in the holistic ratings here. They will have to have, though, the role of district testing coordinator, district testing assistant, campus testing coordinator, or the online session administrator role with the transcribe assistant add-on permission. Okay, so those are the individuals that are authorized to launch the TestNav online rating form. And to do that, once they log into Pearson Access Next, you'll locate the session, go into testing, students and sessions. You're going to locate that student's test that you want to enter in the holistic ratings for here and click Launch Test. After Launch Test is selected here, this TestNav screen is going to appear. So you'll see they don't even have to enter in the username or password for that student. The test tickets are still available if you want them to do that, but all they have to do is log into Pearson Access Next, making sure, again, that they have one of those roles that we discussed. They'll launch test, they'll be taken to this screen. They'll want to verify, it'll have the actual student's name up on top. It'll say welcome and have the student's name there. So they want to make sure that they're entering the correct student's information there. Select Start, and then they'll be able to start entering the proficiency ratings and the rater information. So that's how the holistic ratings will be entered. Next here is moving tests between organizations. You'll be able to do that by going to Setup and then selecting the task to move tests between organizations. You're going to search for the student, and remember you can search throughout the entire state. You'll select the checkbox next to that student's name, and up on the task drop-down, you'll select to move tests between organizations, and then Start. Now remember, you will not be able to move a test if that student is in a test session at the previous district. So again, to repeat, if a student is in a test session in the sending district, you will not be able to move them. So after you make your selection here, select Move Tests Between Organizations and Start, you'll be taken to this screen here where you'll verify the student's information. Select the checkbox here and then select to Move Test. After you do that, you'll be able to see the green Success Changes Saved message will appear indicating that that student's test has been moved. Next here is indicating Do Not Report if there's a testing irregularity. You'll be able to do that in the Pearson Access Next site in the Assessment Management System. Under the tasks here under Students, you'll be able to select the Manage Students Tests to indicate Do Not Report. And if you have a test that has to be unsubmitted, you'll want to make sure to contact Pearson. So that would be a situation where a student may have accidentally or inadvertently submitted their test, but they did not actually complete their test. So you want to make sure to contact Pearson as soon as that happens, so that way Pearson can unsubmit your test and the student can log back in and finish their test. Now, if it's been over 2 hours since that student has been exited from that test, you will have to contact TEA. But again, if it's within 2 hours, you want to contact Pearson. We'll be able to unsubmit that test. The student can continue logging in, can log in and continue testing. Okay, and again, you'll do that under Manage Student Tests. It's also where you'll enter in the different score codes or the different accommodations here. Again, under Manage Student Tests, the Student Test Details screen here is where you'll indicate the score code. Now, once a student submits the test, their test is going to be scored. This would be for those situations normally that are determined by the ART committee and have to be documented in the student's IEP. The different codes are absent medical exception, you're N for no authentic academic response, and O for other student not to be scored. And these are the different accommodations that you'll be able to select on that screen. You have the designated supports, the large print, and also the extra day. Next, we want to take a look here, and as a reminder, you do have operational reports that will help you during the TELPAS assessment window here. Under Reports, Operational Reports, if you select Online Testing under Report Categories, you'll be able to find the TELPAS Summary Report, and you'll be able to access it at a campus or a district level. So that's going to have the status of the entry of the holistic rating information and the grades 2 through 12 listening and speaking and reading tests. So it's going to have the number of students with the different statuses of not started, incomplete, and completed. Then you have the TELPAS Combined Status Report that will be available, again, also at the district and campus level. And this is probably the one that you're going to use the most here, because this is going to have, the report will display the status here. It's going to show you the holistic ratings and rater information has been entered for your students. It's going to show whether the years in U.S. schools have been entered as well. So again, it's going to have the status of the K-12 TELPAS holistic rating entry in grades 2 through 12 listening and speaking reading tests for all the students that are registered within your organization. So those are the two reports that you definitely want to access during the TELPAS assessment window. And just a note here on the test results, remember listening and speaking is new for this year, so we will have the raw score results for listening and speaking online and reading for the online and paper transcription. Those raw score results will be available on May 14th. The scale score results for listening and speaking and reading will be available come August 15th. And that last bullet there is just a note there about how standard setting has to be conducted in the summer. So again, that is information on your test results. When the results are available, you'll be able to find them under published reports here, reports, published reports. Making sure again that you have the correct test administration selected up on the top right. Next is our support information for TELPAS. Again, you can always submit a Pearson customer support form. We do have a new chat feature available. If you have not used that, I'd recommend you using that. And if you have any questions as far as policy is concerned, you want to contact TEA Student Assessment Division at 512-463-9536. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our TELPAS and the Assessment Management System. Thank you so much for attending. We will talk next training.